this is Bob Samuels with Tech Connector, and happy to have a couple of my favorite marketers on to share with you. One of my favorite parts of my job is to learn about and share best practices. So this is a treat for me. Little fun fact about me: I'm highly into pickleball these days. That's my world. It's totally cool. And that part of my world is my new grandchild. So those are my
congrats.
Fun things going on.
Nice.
Yeah. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, no, I'm very fortunate to be able to basically just talk and type for a living and just sort of share ideas and opinions. And I was just telling Bill, 15 years ago, the market had just tanked in late 2008. My wife was pregnant with her first child, so I quit my job, just became a consultant, and still doing it here, 15 years later, and love doing it. But it's just I love being able to. We were talking before. The marketing has become more and more complex, become more and more complicated in complex sales situations, interacting with sales, just creating actual integrated marketing, and the technology and everything continues to evolve. I love being able to translate that and be able to say, like, here's how you actually can approach that in the real world with limited resources. And so I know we'll get into some of those topics today, Bob, but yeah, no, I think behind me is a couple of things that are important to me: music and college football. So happy to talk about those too.
Thank you, Matt. Excuse me, and Bill.
Hey, Bill Doyle here. I guess I'll start. I'm a VP in our Customer Competitive and Market Insights group at SAP. We roll up to our corporate strategy group. And so I think one of the unique things that gives us is kind of we sit in a perch where we operate across the organization, across SAP. So we're not sitting in, let's say, one LOB, let's say it's marketing or sales or so, but they are all our stakeholders. My background is in management consulting, marketing, and customer insights and market insights and so forth. And I guess the fun fact that for myself, I would say, since you led off with one too, Bob, was around, I actually have a real passion, probably developed in the last year or two, for spinning or indoor cycling. I just love it. Mm-hmm. It's a really great, in my own opinion, it's a great way to exercise, and you can never have an excuse because the weather's always good because you're going indoors, so that's the first thing. And the second fun fact, and I'm not endorsing this or anything, but there's a podcast called Stuff You Should Know, and it's just out there, and it's kind of funny from the standpoint, if you want to know the most crazy things in more level of detail, they're usually 30 to 45-minute podcasts around that too. So, just a couple little tidbits about myself too.
Thank you. That's a favorite podcast of mine too. I love those.
Okay.
Excellent. So customer intelligence, that's a super topic, and just delighted to be able to explore with you. Mm-hmm. So, what's your take on customer intelligence and insights and so forth today with all the challenges and so forth out there?
Yeah. I think what I would say is that if you take a step back, like at its highest level, and you look at, I would say, customer insights, market insights, and so forth, there's several trends that I would say. And the first one that I would say is around multi-channel insights. So, honestly, there's so much data and insights out there today. It's kind of like, how do you pick and choose, or where do you pick and choose, and where do you prioritize? And what's the most relevant and important things to bring back into the business, like a company like SAP? I can't remember if I said I'm from SAP or not, SAP is a big software company in the business. We have about 110,000 employees, and we're a global company, and we do a lot in the enterprise application area in software, and we cut across all really lines of business, whether it's ERP, HR, and so forth. So my lens is coming from there. But so multi-channel insights has to serve all those different lines of business, if you will, and then all the different stakeholders in our company as well. So whether it's sales, marketing, customer success. So multi-channel is really important. And I'll get into that more a little bit later. I think the evolution to maybe what I mean, it sounds like, real-time customer insights or near-term customer insights. The more that you can get there that are relevant, the better, I think. We're using a lot more of AI and machine learning tools, technologies, predictive models to not only learn more about customers, but then to actually say what we think or we predict is going to happen, let's say at an account, what we predict that account will buy next or is interested in next and so forth. And I'll get into that a bit more. And then it's also important, like multi-channel delivery. So I'll talk about specifically what I do a little bit more in the CMI organization. I'm actually in the Crystal Ball team, and I can get into that in a minute. But the way we deliver insights into the business is multi-channel. So we have a platform, we have a mobile app, we have email alerts, we have different kind of modalities that our sales, marketing, any teams in the business can take advantage of the insights we have. So I would say that those are maybe 4 major trends that I'm seeing in the market anyhow.
Yeah, I love that. I'll just quickly add, I think, a lot in the past, we've focused on who to talk to, like who are the right people at the right accounts. And look, that's still crazy important, right? Like I think, most of us grow market share by narrowing our focus when we do it right. Like who are the companies that are serviceable and obtainable, and who are the people in that organization that have a vested interest in that outcome, where you need to build consensus with those individuals as a buying group to get a decision. Yeah. So that's the who, which is important. But if you aren't considering the why and the when, it might not work. And so what I mean by that is like, okay, you're reaching out. Why are you reaching out? What is the reason that is buyer centric, that is audience centric for why they need to, why you're reaching out with context? And the when kind of puts that into like something just happened. Something just happened in their company. Something just happened in their industry. Like the intent signals and trigger events that flow like a raging river in your business all day long, whether you're capitalizing on them or not, is significant. I mean, we're gone are the days when you send 10,000 direct mail packages all at once. The best companies today are sending 10 this week, 20 next week, 3 the week after, 42 the week after, based on specific triggers and needs. The why and the when get you into more relevant conversations more quickly and can create more predictable outcomes if you do it right.
100,000% agree. And Matt, I know that I think you said you have a journalism background and so forth, and that kind of thinking is also, you think about when you communicate, right? Everything, you don't communicate until you're ready that you have something of value to communicate, and it's at the right time to do it. So it's just what you said. I'm in violent agreement, if you will, with that. So yeah, but what I could do, Bob or Matt, is talk a little bit more, if you'd like me to, around my specific role at SAP in terms of this topic called customer competitive and market insights, like where I focus in there. And I can also take a broader aperture in terms of what each of those 3 mean to us at SAP. So whether it's competitive, market, or customer, but I could start with maybe segueing into, so I said I'm in the Crystal Ball, that team, and I drive a lot of different things within Crystal Ball, but essentially we started this initiative about 3 years ago in the business. And we've really built what I would call like a massive data and insights graph that we take, you alluded to some of it, Matt, but we take third-party data. So let's say it's behavioral and intent data, but then we also take first-party data. So that's data and insights from SAP itself, let's say on our web properties and so forth. And we take all that data and make sense of it and figure out from a timing standpoint when it's right or the appropriate time to engage in conversations, right, with customers or prospects. And we look at that across the whole buyer's journey, from, let's say, awareness through to mid funnel type of interactions and conversations, then all the way to sale. But by the way, guess what's really important to software companies these days as well is retention, right? Retention, and also lack of churn. So understanding is a customer or prospect for some reason signaling that maybe they're looking at alternatives. So we look at that whole buyer's journey and bring that back into the business. But we actually don't stop there either. We also, within our Crystal Ball organization, we look at other key indicators for accounts, which is around what's their financial situation. We have scoring algorithms around creditworthiness, around share price, all these other indicators that are important. And then we also look at growth metrics. We look at growth companies. We look at those unicorns that have had a lot of investment in them. And we say, those could be prime candidates. So it is truly bringing in a lot of opportunity back into the business. And the way we take all this data graph, we bring it together, and then we organize it in different views, depending on the role at SAP. So if you're a seller, you can take advantage of a certain view that helps you do your job more efficiently and effectively, let's say, engaging with an account. But we also look at companies and logical groupings of companies. So, we look at the trends there. So a seller can see in his or her patch, what are the trends in terms of what is of interest in the Northeast US and so forth. And our marketing teams can take advantage of these bigger groups of companies, and where are their interests? Are they more in early kind of sniffing around awareness stage, or are they more mid or later funnel, ready to make a purchase? And on that basis, our marketing teams, our sales teams will perform certain functions or do certain activities based on that data we're bringing them. And what I would say is that, we are a close partner. If you remember, I said in the beginning of the conversation today, we sit in the overall in the corporate strategy group, but we are basically attached at the hip with our marketing colleagues and with our sales colleagues. So to be clear, we're very important partners and collaborators together. And what I would also, maybe the final point I would make is our stakeholders in the business at SAP really run from top level board through, and our insights down to really the individual seller or the individual marketer and everywhere in between. So I hope that provides some context in terms of what Crystal Ball is about. And I can also talk a little bit more around how we organize ourselves at SAP and across those three areas of competitive, market, and customer insights. But do you have any questions, or are there any questions from the anyone out there around what I've said to date or so far?
Actually, there is one question from Michael in the audience. He asked about, are you able to identify your competitors' customers for your sales and marketing teams to go after?
So our competitors' customers, I want to be careful how I answer this.
Or do you, I guess, do you know install base, what people are currently using out there?
Yeah, we do. So there's different levels that we could potentially access, that information, but specifically, yes, we have access, we have monitor, we engage with certain third-party vendors to help us understand the install base at all companies, and that could include competitors. So it's actually a really good question from the standpoint of, I did walk through a lot of the components that go into Crystal Ball, but absolutely, competitor install base and some other things are also things that we monitor and look at in what we call the Crystal Ball. Yeah.
Yeah, operationalizing this at scale consistently and successfully is sort of where the rubber meets the road. I can talk all day long about like the right intent signals and sort of like, things to find when finding people that have a pain point, have a more explosive solution need, finding those negative intent signals of people that have a problem, hopefully not a problem that, they're already talking about for, using your product or service. But then how do you translate that into playbooks so that there's a consistent way? It's one thing to say, hey, let's take advantage of this intelligence. What does that look like on a Tuesday morning? Like, what are your sales reps doing? What is your marketing team responding to? What are your CS teams working through? And then knowing that a playbook is not going to implement itself, like to think about the change management required when we're going from doing high volume, me-centric content to very explicit, sort of, very targeted customer-centric messages that are going to be based on a disparate set of signals. Like we've seen countless companies like implement this at scale, but the change in culture management component of doing that is really important. You got to have that in mind when you do it.
Yeah, it's huge. And a couple things, like what I wouldn't want folks to depart the time that we're spending here today is to think, oh, crystal ball is just an intent engine or something. It's way beyond that. And if you remember earlier when I spoke about machine learning and AI, we're actually grafting that and putting that over top of a lot of the things we do, including, let's just say, behavioral data and intent data. So it's kind of a whole new game changer in terms of we're putting additional layers of predictiveness on top of what we might be getting from a third party sourcing. That's the first thing I would say. And then Matt, to your point, couldn't agree more. I mean, if you recall what I said a little bit earlier, Crystal Ball's been an initiative itself that's probably been in the business, what have we been, 3 years, maybe something like that. And it's huge change management. I mean, one of the things I would say is that we have a mantra, I'll probably repeat it later on too, around kind of crawl, walk, run. And that's how we really, we continue to operate that day. So if you have a good idea with something to implement, it's crawl, walk, run. And sometimes we won't let, if it's 80% good enough and we feel it meets all the things, we'll start rolling that out rather than waiting to 100%, perfection. And then I think, Matt, to get back to what you were saying around, how do you take these insights and then apply them down through marketing or through different vehicles, whether it's playbooks or whatever it is, right? Dashboards and so forth. That is huge change management. And the ways, one of the ways we do that is just through consistent engagement with the different stakeholders in the business and trying to understand, like, what are the most recent things they're doing. So if I looked at, you take all these, great insights and you say, okay, so, what do I do with them? How do I activate them? So, from a marketing standpoint, we're partners with them. They take our insights and ingest it in a lot of different platforms, if you will, whether it's digital marketing or marketing automation, and use it that way. Sales plays will use our insights in terms of the construction of sales plays and the creation of very, call it smart or segmented lists, to prosecute, if you will. And then I think the proof in the pudding is we have a lot of business stakeholders that will actually reach into Crystal Ball, and they may have like a slightly different use case or other data points that they want to use in terms of what they're doing. And they'll take our Crystal Ball and ingest some of that into even like maybe some other dashboards they have. So we kind of look at this as we're as a one point of contract central model, but in the cases of where someone may have a unique use case, we federate our insights and data, and they can use that then in their, let's say, dashboards or whatever else they're using. So that was just to kind of go over top of what you were saying as well, Matt, around that.
Well, I think, we can get into specifics around like where you get all this data, right? And I think too often people will say, like, I have a particular problem I need to solve. who are the vendors I need to work with around them?
Mhm.
And I think the vendor conversation kind of has to happen kind of last, right? Strategy
Mhm.
first, process second, technology implementation third. And as that relates for me to intent data, it's not where you get the data, it's first what data you need, right? And a lot of
Totally.
these questions go just right back to who are we selling to? What market are we serving? What
Yeah.
do they need? And what are some exhibits of the problem that may start to manifest and present themselves at a contact level or an account level? And then saying like, who has that data?
Yeah.
Right. And knowing that like there may not be one vendor you get that data from. Like most of the clients we have that are where we're building those playbooks, you've got 6sense here and Bombora there, and then you've got like, scoops from Zoom Info, and you've got LinkedIn search, the save searches. And then there
Right.
may be some manual stuff you have to go do as well. Right.
Mhm.
So again, like efficient access to real-time intelligence is great, but don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves and hire a couple people on Fiverr, and create some more manual searches. If that data, if that insight, if that intent signal is highly correlated with a painful problem that you can solve,
Mhm.
Efficiency can actually be efficiency in the process can actually be less effective than allowing yourself to have some manual processes, something that might be a little ugly on the back end, right? Like all these different services you're trying to build together, but
Yeah.
to then go and sort of answer that sales question of like, who do I call next and what do I talk about, right? When I send an email or send a message to a prospect, how do I make sure that's as relevant and precise as possible? Knowing what that data is the first part. Then you can stitch together where it comes from and how you get it on a regular basis, even if it's a little messy.
Totally agree. We start and say one of our key objectives is ultimately to have that the customer have a great customer experience. Like that's way down, right? But then how do you get to that? You take all this data I'm talking about now, you bring it into the company, you put it on the lathe and fine tune it. And then you provide it to our different stakeholders in a manner that's simple, efficient, effective, so they actually can consume it. So all the heavy lifting is done on our side a bit, right? But to your point, there are times when you might need more, call it customization or whatever, and we have that ability too. So I'm still kind of talking about the crystal ball side here, and we talk about mostly around more around the customer insights part of our business. We also have market insights within our CMI team, and we have competitive insights too. But what I would say is from an organization standpoint, one of the things we try to aspire to as well is to evolve from a CMI insights organization that's very human intensive to one that more balances between, let's say, between vendors / partners that can help us on certain, like you just said, Matt, around like how do you take this stuff and do this and that with it, all the way to self-service platforms, and so what we've seen is you think of that as a pyramid. Like we have some of our analysts in the organization that are more human centric, kind of, they'll do deep dives on competitors or market trends. It's like an analytical role almost.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have what's called a flex model, which I think a bit gets to what you're saying, Matt, around there are times when you just have a lot of data or insights where you need some extra hands to either put it together, to process it and to scale it. And that's what we do through our flex models. We use some companies, vendors and partners. I like to use the term partner rather than vendor, to be honest with you, because we consider anyone that we work with is a partner ultimately. And frankly, even if we don't work with them, we keep relationships with companies constantly in the market, because we feel like we learn a lot just from talking to companies who maybe we're not doing business with, and they learn more about us too. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship that way. So we have the flex model. And then I said the self-service platforms, which are, the ultimate scale. We also serve that up to the business as well. So it's kind of those three layers, if you will.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'd point out relative to content or customer intelligence in general is that, like a lot of things, today's innovation will be tomorrow's broken status quo.
Yeah.
So, if the model you build today is relevant to your audience, your customers will change, what they need will evolve. I mean, like a year and a half ago, the way you would market and position what you're doing in the sugar rush of a full steam ahead economy is different than the way you should be talking to customers today when everyone's still watching their pennies. So like you may not necessarily change what you are offering, but why someone needs it and which subsegments of your audience that need it are going to shift over time, right? So does that mean you need to reevaluate that every month? No. But like when big shifts happen in the market, like recessions and pandemics, yes. And have a cadence of an audit of your programs that really is an audit of your audience. How well do you understand the nuances of what they need and how those are shifting? And as those needs shift, as those priorities shift, how does your message, how does your playbook, how does the way you execute that internally change as well? It does require a little bit of ongoing sort of review, optimization, change management. Yeah, that's pain in the butt sometimes and a lot harder than just sort of assuming it's all still working. But this is why, market leaders end up losing a little of their luster, because new companies show up, do it a better way, do it in a more relevant way, and start to catch up quickly.
Yeah, and a good example of that is, kind of when COVID, hit all of us out of the blue. Was this 2-3 years ago now? I lose track, right? But I mean, caught a lot of folks by surprise. And so obviously the market, we had seen dynamics and so forth that unlike we had ever seen. So to your point, Matt, in terms of adapting, changing, and what's good now will not be good 6 months, a year from now, whatever, in terms of the market evolving. I can recall like those were days where we were just working really hard to say, what does all this mean, in a COVID environment? We were harnessing all the insights, all the external data we had. We had some fascinating conclusions out of that around like what was happening in the business, which one of our LOBs were most being impacted by COVID. No surprise, right? That, a travel and expense portfolio was kind of challenged, during COVID, but that's the easy one that I can give an example of. But there were other really nuggets that we pulled out where like, oh, this solution area might be due to what's going on in the market, may have more challenges than, and I know this one's may actually grow despite the fact that there's actually a challenging market right now. So, couldn't agree with you more in terms of like, you have to be responsive to the market and responsive to customer needs. And, that we try to do that on an ongoing basis. And, I think you talked about change management, you did earlier, Matt. And, change management is a constant process, even with Crystal Ball or in our organization, because the reality is we have a lot of early talent that gets hired in the business every quarter, every 6 months. So you can't assume that people are even internally are familiar with the tools, technologies, the playbooks you're talking about, all those things. And then you have churn in the business where someone may move from a marketing role into sales and so forth. So it's a constant process of change management, communications, and education around like all the capabilities that we have in the business in their support and to make them most successful too.
Yeah, something you just mentioned triggered. So you think about the buying committee when you first get a deal on board. That buying committee, once they buy, evolves into the user committee. There may be new people that are now part of that group that are using your product that weren't involved in the why conversation as part of the buying journey. And also, too often we go from having a nice, well-crafted, buyer-centric message in the buying process to now having we're going to just talk about the product, and we're going to help you get implemented. We're going to make it all about product and features, and we don't reinforce the why. We don't continue to reinforce and quantify and communicate the why. Someone that enthusiastically bought this year and then isn't as focused on it, may not remember all those messages if you don't have those in front of them. Or to your point, they may move on to another role. Someone else now has responsibility of that for that role, and was not at all involved in the purchase process. And so if you're not constantly reinforcing the value you provide, I think about this as communications is a big bowl, right? And like our job, like in almost all of these situations, like we need to over communicate. We need to over communicate what's important. Fill that bowl, because if we don't fill it, someone's going to fill it with their own
Yeah.
information. And that almost always works against us.
For sure. And, you know, when I spoke earlier about how our CMI function is structured, at its highest level, we think of it across those three rungs that I talked about earlier, which were customer insights. And a lot of that is around the crystal ball things that I've been talking about a lot. But, oh, by the way, there's other parts in our CMI organization that we call market insights. And we've built a market model, by SAP, for SAP, that really tells what is occurring in the market, where are the growth opportunities in there, by region, by solution area. That goes into our strategy planning, but also teams use that to say, like, where's my best opportunity, my market opportunity. And then the third kind of rung, if you will, within our CMI organization is what we call competitive insights. And that maybe gets back to the question that was earlier by someone in the audience. But that's around where we monitor our competitors. We have points of view around our competitors. We provide that to the sales teams through how to wins or battle cards and so forth. But if you think about, like, if you take all that stuff and bring it back to like the simple question of let's say a digital demand agent sitting in Latvia or something, in a region in the world somewhere. I mean, when they're being asked by their management, hey, here's your quota for the year or whatever. It's like, start with market insights and where is my opportunity, my market opportunity? Yeah. What's that? Then it's like, okay, I know that. Now, what companies and accounts fit within that? Well, that's crystal ball, because it tells you, hey, like within that, you're telling me, let's say HR is really important. Well, crystal ball can tell you who is, what accounts are, looking for potentially HR solutions, and where are they in the buyer's journey? Are they early or are they later stage, right? And then, by the way, it's like, oh, are those companies actually looking at are they researching our competitors or not? And what's the competitive install base? I mean, so, you go from very high level in terms of how we're organized down to that individual seller. And that's what our mission is ultimately, is to help, is two things, is really to help SAP be more successful, but also to have the best possible customer experience that we can deliver, so, and that's being relevant and being equipped and enabled with these insights so that you're bringing something that's relevant and timely to our customers and prospects. Nice. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a question about privacy. I mean, the more you learn about companies, the more maybe either it can get spooky or maybe, against regulations as far as GDPR and so forth. Is it getting trickier as far? I mean, in an ideal world, you're going to get as much information as possible. We have some clients, they want personal information about the individuals that are in the buying committee. How many kids they have, what kind of car do they drive? I mean, just just things that are, they can, the other side, it could be a little bit spooky for them, but they could be nice points of conversation if it's done properly.
Yeah. This could probably be another podcast, but reality is, like, or a webinar with respect to like GDPR. So we're a German company, so we've always been very kind of stringent, I guess, or overweighted on that to begin with. So we are very cognizant of that, and really we try to err on the side of caution there. The crystal ball platform that I've been talking about is actually an account intelligence system. So we're looking at what's happening at accounts. It's not, we don't have personal information in there, PII. So we're somewhat insulated from the GDPR question. The GDPR stuff tends to go further down in the business when marketing teams are taking our insights and they have, consents and, all the stuff that goes on around that, right? And our sales teams too, depending on whether you're in the United States versus Europe, what you can and can't do. And so we're involved with that, but we don't get too intertwined at that at our level, right? I think where it gets interesting as we look forward in terms of the market and so forth is also around the whole the notion of cookies, and like what happens moving forward when, and this is kind of a little bit somewhat intertwined with GDPR and local and regional regulations too, right? And not to get in the weeds because I'm not an expert on this, but that's an area that we're looking at right now too, is around how do we operate digitally in a cookieless future, moving forward. And there are ways that that some of our partners and us are looking at that now. We're doing some testing to have that other ways to identify individuals in the appropriate manners, whether it's alternative IDs, for people, whether it's new innovations in IP addresses, linking them back to people, but still remaining anonymous. You can use hashed emails and some other things like that. So there's different technologies that that our partners and we are looking at, because yeah, right, in the cookie world today, arguably you could say, well, next year or the year after, if cookies go away, then yeah, the impact, what happens to your audience size, right? So we're looking at alternatives there, but it also always gets back to too, the biggest audience size isn't always better. It's getting to the right audience, at the right time. And that's really our mantra. We still want to have scale, but we want to have the right kind of scale moving forward too.
You increase your response rates by narrowing your focus.
Yeah, there you go.
Pure and simple. Like the more you spray and pray, the lower response you're going to get, and the more irrelevant your message is to a higher volume of people that are getting it.
Yeah.
And so you may look, I get it. Like, I mean, market's hard right now. Everyone's struggling to sort of make their number. And the response from too many companies is like, let's just send more stuff out, right? It is going to be irrelevant to more of those people. And even though more people may respond, it's not the right way to sustainably hit your number. And you have now created friction between you and all those other companies that are like, why the hell did I get this? This isn't relevant to me. This seems a little desperate, right? This message doesn't relate to me. And so the next time you come to them, maybe with something that is more relevant, everything you have said to them and said to them in the past is still part of their cognitive understanding of your business. And so it's a lot harder to create 10 campaigns that are relevant to those 10 segments than to create one that is just a spray and pray model. But your response will be better. Your engagement will be better. Your conversions will be better when you narrow your focus.
Yeah, agree. And that's something that constantly needs to be reinforced with teams, so you're speaking to the choir on that one. I think maybe one of the other things I would talk about in terms of market dynamics, because you hit on the GDPR things, Bob, and then, I did speak to a cookieless future, if you will, and some of the things we're looking at there. And then, everyone wants to know what's going on with Chat GPT and all that, right? And these other kind of, and I won't go into that in great detail other than say, we're certainly not only looking at that, but actively, scoping different ways that we in our business can take advantage of that. And, there's some really interesting use cases that we're exploring, whether it's simply asking questions and getting responses back, which is kind of table stakes, or trying to take some of this more detailed or structured first and third party data and trying to use that kind of technology to combine it with, let's say, topics that would lead to new business capabilities or to understand business capabilities moving forward. So it's on our radar and we're working it, but it's, we're still working through the Chat GPT thing, which seems to be the buzzword these days, Right. In some ways, it's very interesting. You can go out there. I mean, it's, it has its purposes. I told you in the beginning of this conversation, I'm a big indoor cycling enthusiast, and I asked a series of questions around. I was like, what if I had to give a minute speech to a class or something in indoor cycling, and what are the benefits? And you just do these things, you ask, and it's amazing what you get back, and it was pretty darn accurate. But the flip side is you can get some really weird things too, so you got to be careful with it. So
Not perfect.
somewhat early days there, but anyhow, a lot of different innovations going on the market, a lot of things we're considering in addition, that we need to prepare for, in addition to what I've spoken about today too. So
Yeah. I think GPT and the AI powered marketing, that's another topic for another day for sure. I've got a final question for both of you, actually.
Okay.
What's the future? What is the customer intelligence and customer insights and so forth? What does this look like in 1 year and 3 years and 5 years? What's the world going to be looking like?
Do you want me to take it first, Matt, or do you want to
Yeah, go for it.
So I think there's a couple things, if you remember what our mission is in Crystal Ball and so forth. But I think, and this is kind of the boring thing, is I'll use the term segmentation, right? But it's going to continue to evolve, and you're going to continue to use different inputs, different data, whether it's propensity, whether it's intent, whether it's segments of interest, to really identify your ideal customers. You're going to see more around, in terms of segmentation, around what do we look at from a retention standpoint, or adoption, maintenance, and so forth. Continue things that we're looking at, evolving, optimizing, improving. More using AI and machine learning around predicting the next solutions to potentially offer up or sell. So not just intent, but there's other ways to do that, right? And then triangulating between these technologies to really say, okay, this is what we want to, provide to our sales and marketing teams. Second thing, I think, like in terms of customer insights evolution that has impact for marketing sales, is we need to holistically look at the customer experience, but then the full buyer's journey. So you have to have a plan and provide insights from awareness, top of funnel, through to sale, bottom of funnel, but then maintaining that funnel throughout, like I said, retention, maintenance, and so forth. I think in the area of behavioral intent, for example, and behavioral type of, we're going to see more like pattern recognition and trying to group patterns of either intent or so forth to understand if a customer or prospect is looking at this, then where else might there else be lookalike customers, that have that similar profile, if you will. So, I don't think there'll be any shortage of new use cases, but those are some of the trends or things that I'm thinking as we move forward will be opportunities for us and ways that we can, continue to improve the customer experience.
Yeah, I mean, yes to all that. I think humanized AI and automation is going to be critical. A lot of what we're seeing from AI is pretty amazing, but also still a little clunky. You got to remember, like, most of these AI tools only know about the world up until September 2021. So from an intelligence and an intent signal standpoint, it's not useful at all. That's a whole different world. But that'll catch up. At some point, the AI machines are going to become close to real time. Then all of a sudden it gets a little more interesting, but it's still, I mean, look, we can see who's coming on our website. So that's a great intent signal. Someone was on our website. They were on the pricing page, right? What you can't do is say, hey, I saw you were on the pricing page earlier today. We should talk, right? I mean, that's creepy. It's weird. It's right. Wrong. So you still have to think about how you're going to orchestrate these conversations. The access in the future, the amount of information we're going to have available to us in real time is going to be incredible. And it will be used for good and for evil. And there will be a handful of companies that attempt to automate spray and pray that just exacerbates problems we all face today with the emails we get and the spam we get and the robocalls and everything else. Smart people that understand their audience, that have empathy for their audience, that have understanding of their audience are going to use these tools for good and will stand out in the marketplace because they do that well. So that opportunity exists today. The opportunity existed 5 years ago. The quality of the information and the technology continues to improve. And that just continues to create a gap between companies that are going to look for shortcuts and those that are going to do it well.
Beautiful.
Cool. Thank you. I agree.
Good discussion, guys. I love it. So any final thoughts before I let you go? Any words of wisdom?
Just not I'd crawl, walk, run, you know, it sounds simple, but honestly, with whatever part of the business the folks are on this call and so forth, like, really adopt that mantra, you know, and don't have to do everything right before you execute or implement something. Crawl, walk, run, operate like a startup. That's what we did in Crystal Ball, you know, find passionate people in your team or your organization to make things happen, and then foster innovation. You know, it sounds like table stakes, but we tell folks on our team and so forth, if you spend a full days of time, do 1/3, you know, it would be awesome to try to optimize 1/3 doing your job and maybe the more mundane things, 1/3 doing your job of interesting things and supporting the lines of business and others, and then 1/3 trying to innovate. So that's kind of how we roll on our team. So maybe that gives you some food for thought.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned though, I think is really important. I mean, like if you've taken notes of all the things we've talked about doing, it is a massive undertaking to start from scratch and do all this, right? So nobody can do that. You can't do it all at once, and nor should you. A phased approach to doing this is almost always more valuable and more productive, and 3 steps sometimes is faster than 1 to get to where you're ultimately going. And I'll finish just by pointing out some research that I saw from Demand Metric a couple of years ago, and it's relevant to this conversation even though it's focused in a different area. So it looked at the correlation between integration of sales and marketing systems and likelihood of companies hitting their sales number. There's a direct correlation, right, between the increased integration of those systems and increased likelihood of hitting their sales number. But the data was not no integration, minimal integration, moderate, advanced integration. The data said no integration, ineffective integration, then minimal, moderate, new, advanced. So if you're not taking advantage of customer intelligence today, and your first phase ineffectively uses that intelligence, you are still making progress. I think that we have to accept that a phased approach means we are correcting ourselves along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, none of us want to be ineffective, but accept that might be part of the process, and that will get you to the promised land faster.
Love it. 100% agree.
Wonderful, wonderful. And then the other thing I like what you guys said is if you're talking to everybody, you're talking to no one.
Mm-hmm.
So really make the conversations very specific, very relevant.
Absolutely.
Wonderful, guys. I appreciate it. This is what I wanted: entertaining and educational. So thank you for your time. I look forward to reconnecting soon.
Thank you, and thanks to the
everyone
audience
for watching,
out
listening
there today. Have a great day.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
And